Hi guys, good evening. In the last class, we discussed how to develop our REST-based application, how to develop a simple REST API. So we are trying to develop provider application. Provider means the application which is providing services to other applications. That is called as provider application. So to develop a provider application, we need to create REST controller. So to represent our Java class as a REST controller, we will use one annotation called @REST controller. Whenever we use @REST controller, that is equal to controller plus response body. So that method will give direct response to the client. Client will send a request to the method. Method will provide direct response to the client. In the REST controller, we are writing several methods. Those methods are mapped to HTTP method, like post method, get method, put method, delete method. Like that, we can write several methods in the REST API. Fine. In the last session, we discussed about one annotation that is called @REST controller. Can you tell me what is the purpose of @REST controller? To represent Java class as distributed component. To represent Java class as a distributed component. What is the meaning of distributed component? B2B communication. Whenever you send a request, it will give the response directly. Any view available or view not available? In the REST API, view will not be available. Direct response. It is equal to @controller plus @response body. After that, we have seen one annotation @get mapping. What is the purpose of get mapping? What is the purpose of get mapping? Map the method to HTTP get request. If you want to map the method to the HTTP get request, we will go for get mapping. And we have seen one more annotation called post mapping. What is the purpose of post mapping? Map the method to HTTP post request. Map the method to HTTP post request. Okay. After that, we have seen one annotation called @request body. What is the purpose of @request body annotation? Come on. What is the purpose of @request body annotation? So to read the data from HTTP request body, to read payload from HTTP request body. If a client is sending payload in the body, to read the data from the payload, to read the payload data from the request body, we are using @request body annotation. And we have used one class called response entity. What is the purpose of this response entity? Come on guys, what is the purpose of response entity? To set a custom HTTP status code for client in response, By default, whenever we send a request, dispatcher servlet will send status code as a 200. 200 means okay. But always I don't want to send 200. Depends on the requirement. My status code will change. If I want to set the status code as per my requirement, then I need to go for response entity. Then after, we have used postman in the last session. What is the purpose of the postman? It is to test REST API functionality. Postman is used to test our REST API functionality. Fine. In the last session, we worked on these concepts: REST controller, get mapping, post mapping, request body, response entity, and postman. REST controller is an annotation that is used to represent Java class as distributed component. So REST controller is equal to controller plus response body. That means all methods will return direct response from that REST controller. No UI pages. Inside the REST controller, we can write multiple methods. Every method should be mapped to HTTP request method. If that method is responsible to give the data to the client, then we will map it to get request by using get mapping. If that method is responsible to take the data from the client to insert the record or to create the record at the server, then we will map it to post request by using post mapping. Whenever you go for post request, client will send the data in the request body. To read the data from the request body, we will use one annotation called @request body. And when method want to send custom status code in the response, then method return type we will take as response entity. Once our REST API development completed, to test the REST API, we don't have any UI. In the morning JRTP class, we have the UI page to test our code. From the UI, we are testing everything. But in the REST API, UI will not be available. Only backend logic will be available. To test that backend logic, we are using one tool that is called Postman. Okay, next one. So today we are going to talk about query parameters and path parameters. Let us talk about what is query parameter and path parameter. Query parameters and path parameters. Query parameters and path parameters both are used to send the data to server in the URL. Both are used to send the data to server in the URL. For example, so let me go for a request. We already know how a request will be represented. So this is client application. Assume that this is my client application and this is resource application. I can say this is a provider application. This is provider application and this is consumer application. Provider application and consumer application. Provider application and consumer applications will be in the different machines, in the different servers they will be running. Consumer application will send a request to provider application. Provider application will send response back to consumer application. Clear, guys? Consumer is available and provider is available. Now, when consumer is sending a request, here we discussed already, request will contain header and body. Request line will be available. Request line will be available. And here header will be available and body will be available. When consumer is sending a request, it will have three things. One is request line. Second one is a header. Third one is body. So these details will go from consumer application to provider application. We already discussed that in the HTTP request. HTTP request structure will be available. In the HTTP request structure, request line will be available, header will be available, and body will be available. What is this request line? Request line will represent URL. So what type of request you want to send? Do you want to send GET request or do you want to send POST request? What is your URL? Okay, now consumer application want to access provider application. Consumer means which will access services from the provider. Provider means which will provide services to other application. Let us take a simple example. This is Make My Trip application. Okay, and this is IRCTC application. Make My Trip application and IRCTC application. Client is communicating with the Make My Trip application to book a ticket. To book a ticket, client is communicating with the Make My Trip application. Make My Trip application communicating with the IRCTC application to book the train ticket. Here client is available. Here client is available. Client will communicate with the Make My Trip application. Make My Trip application will communicate with the IRCTC application. Now here client will send a request to the server. When client is sending a request to the server, that request will contain request line, it will contain header, it will contain body. Okay, request line will contain what type of request. Is it a GET request or is it a POST request? And what is the URL? which URL you want to access, and header will be available, body will be available. Header is used to represent metadata, any tokens that you want to send, any extra information that you want to give to the provider, you will keep in the header part. And what about body? What about the body? Body is used to send some payload, business data. You want to book a ticket. You are a passenger. Your data will be sent from Make My Trip application to IRCTC application as a payload. It will go in the request body. Now, after completion of this request, IRCTC will execute the logic. IRCTC will send the response. What will be there here? Response line will be available, response header will be available, and response body will be available. So this is HTTP response. Response line, response header, response body. IRCTC will give this data to Make My Trip application. Like this, one application will communicate with another application. That is called distributed application communication. It is called as B2B communication. Okay, here let us take two scenarios. First time, client is booking a ticket. Okay, first time, client is booking a ticket. That is called as book ticket. Second time, client want to get the ticket. Okay, first time client is trying to book the ticket. Second time, client is trying to get the ticket after some time. I booked the ticket today morning. Evening, I want to take the ticket for printout. I book the ticket and I want to get the ticket. Two operations are available. Book ticket, we are going to implement as a post request method because it has to take the data from the client and it has to book the ticket. What about the get ticket? It is a get request. I will give the ticket ID and I want to get the ticket data. Ticket number will be available. Based on the ticket number, I want to get the ticket object. Booking the ticket will be implemented as a post request method. Getting the ticket will be implemented as a get request method. And remember, whenever we are sending post request to the provider, we can send the data in the URL, we can send the data in the header, and we can send the data in the body also. Post request, put request, delete request will contain URL, header, and body also will be available. Data can be sent either in the URL, data can be sent in the header, data can be sent in the body also. But when it comes to get request, get request will not contain body. Only post request, put request, delete request will contain the body. By using post, put, delete, we can send payload. But when it comes to get request, body will not be available. Why body will not be available for get request? What is the purpose of get request? Get the data. That's why in the HTTP methods, get request will not contain body. So whenever client is sending get request to the provider, client cannot send payload. Body will not be available. Then how client can send the data to the provider in the get request? That's where query parameters and path parameters comes into picture. So now I want to access one URL, man. Suppose something like this, www.youtube.com, www.youtube.com/watch ? V is equal to video ID. Got it? Now I'm going to click on some video in the YouTube. Which video I'm trying to watch? I will click on that video. I will click on that video. When I click on that video, it will send me a get request to the YouTube with the video ID in the URL. This is called as query parameter. This is called as query parameter. So when I go to YouTube, when I click on some video, I'm sending a get request or I'm sending a post request. Now see here some video is available. Let me click on that video. So when I click on that video, if you observe the URL, observe that URL, what happened? youtube.com/watch v is equal to some ID. So here, when I click on that video, get request is going to the server, post request is going to the server, get request. For the get request, body will be available or body will not be available? Body will not be available. When there is no body, how to send the data from consumer application to provider application? Only one option, either in the URL or in the header. Body is available or body not available? Body not available. Suppose if I go for post put delete, URL will be there, header will be available, body will be available. We need to remember that point, guys. Now see here, query parameters and path parameters. What is the purpose of this? Query parameters and path parameters are used to send data in URL. If you want to send the data in the URL, then you need to go for query parameters and path parameters. What is the example? So YouTube, I have given one example. Take this and give this. What is this, guys? www.youtube.com/watch v is equal to some ID. What is this v is equal to ID? This is called as query parameter. So now this is QP example. QP nothing but query parameter, guys. Similarly, in some projects, we will see path parameter. We will see some path parameter. So www.ashokitech.com/courses/Java. Okay, guys. Now here, this is my URL. In this URL, I'm sending course name as Java. This is called as path parameter. This is called as query parameter. If you want to send the data in the key value format, then you will go for query parameter. If you want to send only value without key, then you can go for path parameter. So this URL contains query parameter. This URL contains path parameter. Generally, whenever client application sending a get request to the provider application, then we are going to use either query parameters or path parameters. If it is post request, do we need that? No, if it is a post request, we don't need that. Why? Why it is not required in the post request? Post request will contain body. We can send the data in the body. But for get request, body not available. But I want to tell to server, hey, play me this video. Hey, give me this video. Hey, give me this ticket. Give me this customer data. Give me this book data. I want to send a request to get the data. But what data I want to get? Sometimes I want to get all the books. Sometimes I want to get particular book. Sometimes I want to get particular employee. I want to get particular product. I want to get particular customer. I want to get the data. But which data I want to get? I need to tell some information to the server. So that is a get request. For the get request, body will not be available. Then if you want to send the data to server in the get request, then you have two options. One is by using query parameters. Another one is path parameters. Now tell me, what is the purpose of query parameters and path parameters, guys? Query parameters and path parameters are used to send data in the URL. This is query parameter example and this is path parameter example. One difference, query parameter will be available in the form of key value. What about path parameter? Direct value will be available. So here, when we are going for get request, when client is sending get request, then client can use query params and path params to send data to server. When client is sending get request, then client can use query parameters or path parameters to send the data to server. Note, get request will not contain request body. Get request will not contain request body. So we have to use either query param or path param. Query param or path param to send data. If it is a post, if it is a put, if it is a delete, either they can send in the URL, they can send in the body. They have two options. They have two options. But when I go for get request, only one option. Either go for query parameters or path parameters. Able to understand? Right. What is a consumer? Come on. What is consumer? The application which is accessing the data from other applications, that is called consumer application. What about the provider? The application which is giving the services to other application is called as provider. Can one provider have multiple consumers? One application can provide the services to multiple applications. Simple example, Google Pay. Google Pay communicating with how many banks? Many banks it is communicating. IRCTC supporting for how many bank payments? Many. Train tickets I can book only in the IRCTC. Yeah? How many applications are there to book the train tickets? Make My Trip, Yatra, Go Ibibo. Lot of applications are available. But who is the owner of Indian Railways? IRCTC. All these applications are accessing the services from the IRCTC. That is called B2B communication. When B2B communication is available, consumer will send a request to provider. It can be get or it can be post or put or delete. When to go for put request? If you want to update the resource, some data, some record is available in the provider, I want to update that record. Then I will send a put request. I want to delete one record. Delete request. I want to send one new record. I want to send one new record. Come on, post or put. What is the difference between post and put? Post is used to create the new record. Put is used to update the existing record. I want to get some records. Then I will go for get request. What is a payload? What is a payload? Business data. Any data that is exchanging between consumer and provider in the body, that is called as a payload. Passenger data or ticket data, that is called as a payload. What is a header? Header. What is a header? Header is a metadata. Any extra information that you want to send to the consumer or provider, then we will go for header. Are you clear? Now, in the request, how many parts available? HTTP request contains how many parts? HTTP request contains 3 parts. What are those 3 parts? Request line is available, request header is available, request body available. How many parts are there in the HTTP response? Response line available, response header available, response body. What will be there in the request line? What type of request you want to send, to which URL you want to send the request will be there in the request line. Header will contain metadata. Body will contain business data. Got it? Now, consumer sending a get request to get the ticket data based on the ticket number by using a get request. So now, can consumer send the ticket number in the request body for the get request? Come on guys, consumer, understand my requirement. Consumer want to send a get request to the provider to get the ticket data. How to send the ticket number? How to send the ticket number? Can I send in the body? No. Why I can't send in the body? For get request, body will not be available. Either you need to send in the URL or header. In the header, we don't send the business data. Header is used for only metadata. Then what is the option? URL, either as a query parameter or as a path parameter. Suppose I'm going for post request. In the post request, how many ways I can send the data? Either in the URL or in the body. Now, when to send the data in the URL, when to send the data in the body. Are you guys clear? If your data is huge, if your data is huge, or if your data is secured, secret, sensitive data, if your data is huge, like one passenger data, first name, last name, Aadhaar number, PAN card number, train number, from address to address. So if you have so much of data, then we should go for body. If your data contains some sensitive data like PIN number, password, your any personal information is available, then also we will go for body. Now, suppose I want to get one book data based on the book ID. Book ID is any secret or no secret? No secret. I want to get one employee ID. Secret or not secret? No. When your data is not sensitive, when your data is not sensitive, and if your data is very small and it is not sensitive, then send in the URL. If your data is huge and if your data is sensitive, then you will send in the body. Are you clear? Good. Now, let's understand what is query parameter and path parameter. Tell me, what is query parameter and what is path parameter? Come on, guys. What is the purpose of query parameters and path parameters? Both are used to send data in the URL. Query parameter will be available like this. Path parameter will be available like this. When client is sending GET request, then client can use query parameters or path parameters to send data to server. Example, ticket number. I want to send a ticket number. I want to send one employee ID. I want to send some book ID. I want to send some customer ID, etc. This data is sensitive or this data is not sensitive? Not sensitive. GET request will not contain the body. So we have to use either query param or path param to send data to server. Client want to send a GET request to the server. In that GET request, client want to send some ID. Okay, that is not sensitive. Then we can send in the URL. Suppose client want to book a ticket. Client want to book a ticket. To book the ticket, passenger data required. First name, last name, gender, email ID, phone number, journey date, train number, from address to address. Lot of information is available. Then what we will do? I will send in the URL or I will send in the body? I will send in the body. So we need to have that maturity. When to send the data in the URL, when to send the data in the body. As a developer, you should have that common sense. Which data we need to send in the URL, which data we need to send in the body. If it is a GET request, there is no body. If it is post or put or delete, either you can send in the URL or you can send in the body also. Got it? Now, let's understand how to work with query parameters. Let's understand how to work with query parameters. Before going to work with query parameters, we need to understand some concepts related to query parameters. Right? Query parameters. Now, query params will represent data in key value format. Query parameters will represent the data in the key value format. Query parameters will start with question mark. Query parameters should start with the question mark. Query params will start with question mark. That is the starting point of the query parameter. Now you see youtube.com/watch question mark. B is the key and ID is the value. B is equal to video ID. When you upload some video in the YouTube, every video will get one unique ID. Okay. When you click on that video, it will send a GET request with the video ID to the server. Then that video will buffer. It will play on your browser. Right. Now, Query parameters will represent the data in key value format. Query parameters will start with a question mark symbol. We'll start with question mark symbol. Suppose I want to send multiple query parameters. In the same URL, I want to send course name is equal to JRTP, timings is equal to evening, something like that. Client want to send multiple query parameters in the URL. When client want to send multiple query parameters, they will be separated with the and symbol. Query parameters will be separated using and symbol. Will be separated using and symbol. So now I want to send multiple query parameters. Here what I'm sending? Here I'm sending question mark v is equal to some ID, and I want to send and country is equal to some India, something like that. If you want to send multiple query parameters, they should be separated by using and symbol. Okay, so it will be represented in the form of key and value. So this is start point of my query parameter. This is a key and this is value and key value. Like this you can send multiple query parameters in the URL. Query params will represent in data in key value format. Query parameters will start with a question mark symbol. Query parameters will be separated using and symbol. Okay, and another important point, query parameters should present only at the end of the URL. Whenever you are sending a query parameter, your query parameter should present only at the end of the URL. After your URL got completed, then at the end query parameter will start. Clear? Next one. Here guys, when client is sending a query parameter, how our REST controller will read that? You are sending a request with a query parameter. My REST controller should take the data from the URL, right? Client is sending a request. In the GET request is sending with a query parameter. My REST controller should take that data. My REST controller should read the data from the query parameter. To read the values, to read query parameters from URL, to read query params from URL, we will use @request param annotation. What is the annotation we are using, guys? We are using @request param annotation. What is the purpose of request param annotation? Come on. Request param annotation is used to read the data from the URL based on the key. Based on the key, I want to get the value. When client is sending a GET request with a query parameter, my REST controller should read the data from the query parameter. To read the data from the query parameter, our REST controller method will use request param annotation. Are you clear? Good. Now go here. Yesterday, we developed one REST API. User REST controller is available. I have here map. What is the purpose of map? To store the data in the form of key and value. User ID will come. User ID will be stored as a key and user data will be stored as a value. Now, from this map, I want to get the data based on the user ID. Okay. Client will send the post request to insert the user. After some time, client want to get the user based on the user ID. Get request. Okay. Let me go for public direct user, get user, and let me take integer user ID. Public user, get user. What is the method return type? What is my method return type? User. And what is this method? Get user. What is the parameter? User ID. Let me map this method for get request. How to map it to get request? By using get mapping /user. Okay. Post mapping user is available. get mapping user is also available. I got the user ID. User ID is a key in the map. When you know the key, can you get the value of that key? Come on. I have a map. In the map, data available in the form of key and value. I know the key. How to get the value? Map dot get of key. Now let me go for map. What is that map? Data map dot get of key. Key is user ID. What it will return for me? What it will return for me? User object. Now I want to return that user object. I want to return that user object. Now if you observe, I am having a post request method and I am having get request method. What is the purpose of post request method? What is the purpose of get request method? Come on. Post request method is used to insert the data, create the user. It will take the data from where? From where my method is taking the user data? From the request body. Why from body? Because it is a post method, data will come in the body. Data can come in the URL, data can come in the body. I'm expecting user data in the body. So to read the data from the body, I'm using request body annotation. What about this method? Get method. This method will have body or will not have body? Will not have a body. Then client will send user ID in the URL. If a client is sending the user ID in the URL, I want to read that. In order to read that, what is the annotation? I will go for a annotation called @request param key is user and user ID. Key should be user ID. So it will take the user ID from the URL. It will give to my method as a parameter. Then my method will use the user ID to get the data from the map. Map.get of key, I will get the value. Then I'm going to return that value. What my method is returning? User object. Client will receive the object or client will receive the JSON? Client will send a get request with the user ID as a query parameter. So my method is reading the data from the query parameter. Based on the query parameter, it is getting the data from the map and I am returning that object. So client will receive the object or client will receive the JSON. Who will convert the object to JSON? Internally, Spring Boot will use Jackson API to convert the Java object to JSON. Now here, method is expecting object as a parameter. Okay, client will send object as an input or client will send JSON data. Client will send the JSON data. But what my method is expecting? Object. Who will convert the JSON to object? Jackson API will be used in the Spring Boot internally. When a client send a post request with the JSON data, that JSON data will be converted to Java object. That object will come to our method as a parameter. When a client send a get request with the user ID in the query parameter, my method will read that query parameter. Using that, it will get the data from the map and my method is returning a object. Object will not go to the client. Object will be converted to JSON. JSON data will go to the client. Clear, guys? Now let's try this. Run this application. REST API debug as boot application. I'm trying to debug this method. Okay. Application started. Do I have any UI to insert the user to get the user? UI is not there. Why UI is not there? It is pure backend application. There is no front end for this. It is business application, B2B communication, distributed application. Then how to test these methods now? Whether this method is working or not, whether this method is working or not, how can I test it? And observe. Here I am taking return type as a response entity. Here I am taking return type as a user. Why? For get request, I want to give 200 status code default. For post request, I want to give 201. That's why I have taken response entity. Online people able to understand?
Yes, sir.
Guys, seriously, RESTful services is very interesting subject if you concentrate, because in the real time, nowadays in the real time, 95% of the projects are running with the REST APIs only. Almost all the projects are running on the REST API. Backend will be REST API. Frontend will be Angular or React. Forget about JSP, forget about Timeleaf. They are outdated. For UI, Angular or React. Angular will call the REST API by giving JSON data. REST API will give the JSON data to the Angular. Okay, communication will happen between the Angular application and backend REST API. That REST API can be developed by using Java, can be developed by using Python, .NET. Every technology supporting for RESTful services. As we are Java developers, we are understanding REST API development with Java. If you go for a .NET, there also query parameter, path parameter, HTTP protocol, request, response, status code, payload, everything will be available. The only thing, syntax will be different. Concept is same. Concept is same, only syntax will be different. Are you able to understand my point, guys? So please focus when you are learning RESTful services. In the JRTP, third mini project will be completely based on the REST API only. 2 projects we have done with the UI, front and back end in the single project. But third mini project, the logic will be on the REST API side. We need to develop complete REST API in the third mini project. So understand the concepts, because these concepts are very important. You guys may not realize importance of these REST APIs, but working people knows what is the importance of the REST API. You know, evening 7:30 one batch is there for me, Spring Boot microservices. 230 or 240 people are there. Almost all are working people. They are very interested for RESTful services and microservices, because without REST API microservices, they cannot survive in the project. Every project is working on REST API. If they want to change the job, if you go for interview, will anybody ask you what is a scriptlet in the JSP? Will anybody ask you what is directive in the JSP? No. People will be asking questions on the REST API, microservices, Spring Boot. That is trend in the market. So you should become very strong in REST APIs development. 99.99%. Tomorrow your work will be there on the REST API in the company. Once you get into the company, 99.999% of time, your work will be there on the REST API. Your completed task will be based on the REST APIs. From last 5 years, I am working on the REST APIs. My project is complete, full stack application. Front end is Angular, back end is REST API. REST API we are developing by using Spring Boot. REST API, microservices. What is the meaning of microservice? Small REST APIs will be available. Instead of developing one single big application for one functionality, one REST API. Loan application, one REST API. Net banking, one REST API. Credit card, one REST API. Gold loan, educational loan, home loan, personal loan. Several functionalities are there in the bank. For every functionality, one REST API is available. Collection of REST APIs is called microservices application. Earlier, people used to develop monolith. Today, microservices application. Able to follow me? Good. What is the REST API? It is a distributed application which will take JSON data as input, which will give JSON data as output. That's it. Complete B2B communication. Now, my application started. I want to test my application. When we are developing the REST API, in order to test it, we need to use one tool that is called Postman. Go to Postman. Yep. User. First of all, I want to test first method, which is add user. Observe this method. This method is binded to post mapping. This method is binded to post mapping. What is the meaning of post mapping? Client should send post request. Client should send post request. And what this method is expecting? User object. Client will send the user object or client will not send the object? Client will send the object or client will not send the object? Client will not send the object. Then what client will send? Either XML data or JSON data. We will talk about XML later. Currently, we are working on the JSON. I will show you example with XML also. Currently, I am using only JSON data. Client is sending JSON data in the body. It is a post request. It will have a body. How to read the data from the body? What is the annotation? @request body. In the body, JSON will come. My method is taking JSON directly, or my method is taking object as a parameter? Object as a parameter. Here, let's understand some internals. Okay. Here, guys, in this method, instead of taking object as a parameter, if I take string as a parameter, still it will work. But the problem is direct. Whatever the JSON client is sending, that JSON will come to our method as a parameter. String JSON, right? Here, client is sending body as a JSON data. If your method is expecting string as a parameter, raw JSON, whatever the JSON client is sending, that JSON will come to my method as a parameter. After that, I should write the logic here, convert JSON to Java. I should write my own logic to convert JSON to Java. Do you know how to write the logic to convert JSON to Java? We know that. But the problem is my method will work only when client send the JSON as an input. If a client is sending XML as an input, my method will work or my method will not work? No. So if you directly take the JSON as an input, your method will be tightly coupled with only JSON data. Make my trip will send JSON, but Yatra will send XML as an input. Then what about our method? Our method will not work. That's why we will never deal with direct JSON or direct XML in the REST controller. Always we are going to deal with objects. Okay. Client can send JSON, client can send XML. I don't care. I want only object. Who is responsible to convert that JSON to object or XML to object? That is the headache of the front controller. Front controller will take the data from the body. Front controller will convert that data into object. My method is loosely coupled with JSON or XML. That is the reason I'm taking object as a parameter. Okay, guys. My method is taking object as a parameter. When my method is taking object as a parameter, client can send JSON data as an input. Client can send XML data as an input. Whatever the data client is sending in the request body, my dispatcher servlet will read that XML or will read the JSON. If it is JSON, it will use Jackson API internally, convert that JSON data to Java object, give the Java object to my method as a parameter. Same thing here. My method is returning what? User object. Can I convert this object? Can I return direct XML as a output? Yes or no? I can return string. I have the user object. By using JaxB API, I can convert that object to XML. I can return XML as the output. But what is the problem? Tomorrow, other client don't want XML. They want JSON. Some client want XML. Some client want JSON. So here, do I need to take that burden to convert Java to XML, Java to JSON, or it will be taken care by front controller? It will be taken care by front controller. So that's why my method is returning object as a parameter. So here, whenever we are developing any REST API, method parameters or method return types, we don't take JSON XML directly. We will take only objects. If I take only object, what is the advantage? If I take the object, what is the advantage? My REST API is loosely coupled with the XML data and JSON data. Client can send XML, client can send JSON. Client may take XML, client may take JSON. My REST API loosely coupled. My REST API will support for both formats. It will support for XML as well as JSON as the input and output. Now, let us test this method, post request. Go to our post method. I want to make a post request. It is expecting user object, but postman will send the user object. Postman will send the JSON data. JSON data. Select post. Localhost colon 8080 user body. I want to send the data in the body, user data. So body, select raw data. What data you are sending in the body? JSON. If you want to send XML, select XML. If you want to send the JSON, select JSON. I want to send JSON data. Now click on send. Click on send. Now when I send that request, there is a breakpoint available. Okay. Client is sending JSON data in the body. Look at my method parameter object. So now what my method received? Object. That means something happened. Something happened in my application. Client sent the request. Request came to dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet gave to handler mapper. Identified controller. Dispatcher servlet calling my controller method. In between, some magic happened. Whatever the JSON client has sent, that JSON converted to Java object. Who converted? Dispatcher servlet converted. Dispatcher servlet will use one component in the internally one component that is called message converter. What is that? Message converter. What is the purpose of a message converter? What is the purpose of message converter? To convert raw data to Java object. Java object to raw data. Now here there is a question. How dispatcher servlet understood that client sent only JSON? How dispatcher servlet understood that client sent only JSON? That will be available in the request header, which data client is sending to the REST API. Now let us see our postman. Here we selected what is the raw data format? JSON. Now go to header section. In the header section, there is one header called content type. What is the content type? Application/JSON. Now, client is sending request to the provider with the request header, request body. Body contains JSON data. Header contains metadata. In the header, there is one HTTP header. Content type is equal to application/JSON. With that, dispatcher servlet understood that this client sent JSON data in the body. When the data is there in the body as a JSON, then dispatcher servlet will go to JSON converter, message converter with a Jackson API. Then immediately dispatcher servlet will call, hey Jackson, come here. I got the JSON data. Take it, give me Java object. Then that message converter will convert your JSON data to Java object, will give to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will pass that Java object to our method as a parameter. For example, if a client is sending XML data in the body, then content type will be available with application/XML. If XML is there, then dispatcher servlet will use message converter with JAXB API. What is the purpose of JAXB API? Convert from the XML to Java object. If a content type is JSON, convert from JSON to Java object. So header is playing very important role here. Body contain payload. Header contain metadata. So here one header is sending from client to server. What is that header? Content type. What is the value available in the content type? Application/JSON. What is the meaning of that? In the request body, JSON data available. Who will read that information? Dispatcher servlet. That is called pre-processing of the request. Before processing our request, dispatcher servlet will read what data is there in the URL, what data is there in the header, what data is there in the body. In the header, it observed content type application/JSON. That means in the body, JSON data available. Take that JSON data, give it to message converter. What message converter will do? Convert that JSON to Java object, give to dispatcher servlet. Then dispatcher servlet will call our method by passing that Java object as a parameter. In the whole internet, if you check also, nobody will give you this much clarity how that JSON is converting to Java object. How that JSON is converted to Java object. That is not visible for our eyes. That will happen internally. Internally, dispatcher servlet is using a component called message converter. Which message converter? Jackson converter or Jaxby converter depends on the content type header. Content type contains application/JSON. Let's take JSON converter. That will convert the JSON data to Java object. Now I got the Java object. What is my logic here? I'm printing the Java object. Okay. JSON data converted to Java object or not? Converted to Java object. Map.put. What is the purpose of map.put? Store the data in the map. Now F8. Go to Postman. What is the response? User saved. What is the status? 201. Now see here. We got the response. Response line will be available. Response header will be available. Response body will be available. In the response body, we got the message user saved. Body contain plain text data. In the response body, I got plain text because it is simple string message. My method is returning a simple string message user saved. That is a plain text. For this plain text, message converter required or not required? Not required. Method is returning only string. That string will go directly in the response body. What is the status code? 201 is coming as a status code. What are the headers? Content type. What is the response content type? Text plain. What is the request content type? JSON. Request content type is a JSON. Response content type is a plain text. Response body available. Response headers available. Response status code is available. Status message also available. Client sent a request and server send the response. Are you guys clear with this? With this, one user created with the user ID as 1. One user created with the user ID, sorry, 202 is the user ID. Now, using this 202, I want to get the user data. I want to get the user data. User is inserted by using post request. Now I want to get the user. Do I have any method to get the user? Do I have any method to get the user? Yes, we are having get mapping / user. Get user method is available. How it is expecting data? How it is expecting data, guys? Come on. How it is expecting data? Request param. So it is a get request. Can I send the data in the body? I cannot send the data in the body. Can I send the data in the body or I cannot send the data in the body? I cannot send the data in the body. What is the option I have? URL. That is query parameter. Key and value. What should be the key? User ID equal to value. Now, go to browser. It is a get request method now. Can I send from browser? Can I send get request from browser? Yes. Let's go for localhost :8080 / user user ID key user ID equal to 202. I am giving the user ID as a 202. Send the request. Okay. Now there is a breakpoint. There is a breakpoint. Now see the method parameter. 202 coming to the method parameter or not? That means, can I say dispatcher servlet taking the data from the URL, giving to my method as a parameter? Pre-processing. That is pre-processing. How dispatcher understood that User ID coming in the URL as a query parameter. Request param annotation. When our method is having a parameter with the request param, it will understand that for this method, user ID required. That user ID will come as a query parameter. It will check in the query parameter. Is there any key available like this? User ID, yes, I have given. User ID is equal to 202. It has taken that user ID given to my method as a parameter. Map.get of key. When I get map.get of key, what will happen? I will get the value. What my method is returning? Object. My method is returning object. Client will take the object or client will not take the object? Client will not take the object. Then what should happen? What should happen? Method is returning object, but client will take the object or client will not take the object? Client will not take the object. Then what should happen? Object should be converted to JSON data. Send that JSON data to the client. Who will do that? Programmer or dispatcher servlet? Dispatcher servlet. Method is returning object. F8. Go to browser. What happened? Am I getting object to the browser? I'm getting JSON data to the browser. That means post-processing happened. Post-processing happened. Who is responsible for pre-processing and post-processing? Who is responsible for pre-processing and post-processing? Dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet. My method is returning object as a return type, but client will take object or client cannot take the object. Client may be Java, may not be Java. Client don't understand what is a Java object. So here our REST API should not take object as input, should not give object as a output. When my method is returning object as a output, that object will be converted to JSON data. That JSON data will go to client as a response. Are you guys clear? Message converters are working. Message converter. Client is sending post request with JSON data converted to Java object given to my method. Method is returning the Java object. Java object converted to JSON given to the client as a response. Same request I can send from postman also. I want to send get request from the postman. How can I do that? Select get. Okay. User. What is the URL pattern? /user. Query parameter. User ID. Question mark. User ID is equal to 202. I'm sending a request with a query parameter. User ID equal to 202. Click on send. Am I able to get the JSON response now? Earlier, when I go for post request method, I got plain text as a response. When I go for get request method, I'm getting JSON as a response. What is the status? 200. What is the meaning of 200? Success. Our request processed successfully. Our request processed successfully. Yes, good. So with this, I hope you understood what is post mapping, what is get mapping, what is request body, and what is request param. What is request param? What is request param? It is used to take the data from the URL. Now tell me, what is the query parameter? Come on. Query parameters will represent the data in the key value format. Query parameters will start with question mark. Query parameters will be separated using and symbol. That means we can send multiple query parameters. Query parameters should present only at end of the URL. How to read query parameters in the REST controller? To read query parameters in the REST controller, we are using @request param annotation. Suppose if a method is having multiple query parameters, come on guys, and symbol will be available in the URL. How to take multiple query parameters in the method? Another method parameter. We will just go for another method parameter. Okay, see here. if you are having more than one query parameter, get user, okay, or else get user data. I'm taking this, okay. User ID is one query parameter and I want to go for another query parameter, okay. User name, okay, string user name, something like this. How many query parameters available now? One is user ID and the another one is username. Like this, we can take multiple query parameters from the URL. Then how to send the request? User ID is equal to 202 and user name is equal to some value. Username is equal to some value. Like this, we can send multiple query parameters in the URL. When you are sending multiple query parameters in the URL, you need to have multiple method parameters for that. Okay, guys, good. Next one, we are having path parameter. What is the next one? Path parameter. Query parameters we understood. To send the data in the form of key and value. Now let us go for path parameters. What is the purpose of path parameters? Come on. What is the purpose of path parameters? Path parameters also to send the data to the server in the URL direct value, no key. Query parameter, key value. Path parameter, direct value, no keys here. Path parameters to send data to server in the URL. Path parameter will represent direct data in the URL, no key and value. Path parameters will represent data directly. Path parameter will represent data directly. Path params can present anywhere in the URL. Query parameters can present only at the end of the URL. Path parameter can present anywhere in the URL. Path parameters will start with a slash. Path param will start with a slash. If you have multiple path parameters and will be separated by slash only. Path param will start with the slash and will be separated by slash only. Are you guys clear? Now, here guys, one thing is when you are writing a method with the path parameter, okay, where path parameter will come in the URL, we need to represent that. Let us see. Get user, query param is available. Let me write another method, okay, or else let me comment this method. Now, let me take public user, get user. I'm expecting integer user ID. Now, data map dot get of user ID, which will return me user object. Then I want to return that user object. It is binded to get request. Let me go for get mapping. In the get mapping, let me go for user. Now, after this, I need to specify some ID. Okay. So where that path parameter will come in the URL, we need to specify. Slash user is my method URL pattern. Curly brace ID. That means in the URL, after user, whatever the data is coming, that is my path parameter. To read the path parameter, we will use one annotation called @path param of ID. To read the query parameter, we will use request param. To read the path parameter, we will use path param annotation. Okay. To read the path parameters, we need to represent path parameters. We need to represent path parameters position in the URL pattern. Okay. I'm going to specify like this. Example, if I'm taking get mapping slash user slash ID. What is the meaning of this slash ID? What is that ID? I'm keeping in the curly braces. It represents path parameter. Here after this, I can write data. What is the meaning of that? What is the meaning of that? User is a URL pattern. Data is also URL pattern. What about this ID? Path parameter. Query parameter will present only at the end of the URL. Path parameter can present anywhere in the URL. Okay. Path parameters can present anywhere in the URL. Path parameter will start with a slash, will be separated by slash only. We need to represent path parameters position in the URL pattern like below. In the below URL pattern, ID is path parameter because it is in the curly braces. User is a method URL pattern. Data is also method URL pattern. To read the path parameters, we will use path variable annotation. What is annotation? Path variable. Path param, if you observe, path param from where it is coming? WebSocket. That is not our Spring annotation. Okay. So we cannot use path param annotation. We need to use path variable annotation. To read query parameter, we will go for request param. To read path parameter, we will go for path variable annotation. When we are writing path variable, that path variable should be represented in the URL. Path variable should be represented in the URL. Okay. Now let me run this application. Observe, I have post request method and I have get request method. This get request method is expecting query parameter or expecting path parameter. How can you understand that it is expecting path parameter here in the URL pattern? Am I representing query parameter? Not required. It will come in the key value. Based on the key, I can read it. But when you go for path parameter, directly value will come. But in the URL, where that value will come, which position that value will come? Is it coming at the end of the URL? Is it coming in the middle of the URL? Is it coming at the start of the URL? We need to specify the position of the path parameter. How to specify the position of the path parameter? Curly braces. We need to specify position of the path parameter using curly braces. That means any data that is coming between user and data, that is called as path parameter. Any data that is coming after user, before data, that is called my path parameter. How to read the path parameter? Which annotation? I'm using path variable annotation. By using path variable annotation, we can read that path parameters. Okay, good. Run this application. Right click, debug, boot application. First, I need to insert the record because it is a map. When application restarted, map will be recreated. Clear the console. Go to post request method. Post request method /user. Post request method /user body ID data. I'm giving 202 John record. Click on send. When I send, what happened? User saved 201 created. Now I want to go for get request /user /202/data. That is my URL pattern. So if you observe my URL pattern, localhost colon 8080 /user /202/data. So now here, which one is path parameter? How can you understand? Method URL pattern. In the method URL pattern, I have given like this: user /ID/data. If you see any curly braces in the URL pattern, that is called path parameter. Okay. Now let's send a get request. Click on send. Now, am I able to get the data? Am I able to get the response body? With the 201, I'm able to get that response body. Okay, guys, fine. So let me keep a breakpoint. Send it again. Click on send. I'm sending a get request with the path parameter. Now go to this. See that user ID coming to method parameter or not? How that path parameter coming to our method parameter? Who is taking that? Who is taking care of that? Dispatcher servlet is taking care of that. Dispatcher servlet is taking care of that. Right. Client sending get request with the path parameter. REST controller getting the path parameter value to the method parameter. So dispatcher servlet will read the data from the URL, will give to our controller method. That is called pre-processing. With that ID, I'm getting the data from the map. I'm returning the object. Object is going to the client. Object is not going to the client. Object is going to the client. Object is not going to the client. Object is not going to the client. Then what is going to the client? JSON data is going to the client. Who is converting that object to JSON? Message converter is doing that conversion. User question mark user ID is equal to some value which I have given. This is method with the query parameter. To access this method, we need to send query parameter in the URL like this. Now here we are having path parameter. This is the method which is expecting path parameter. So to access this method, what is the URL? Here /user /202/data. So if you observe, ID will come after user, before data. It can present anywhere in the URL. Now the question, what is path parameter and what is query parameter? Come on guys. What is the purpose of path parameters and query parameters? Path parameters and query parameters are used to send the data to the URL. Path parameter will represent in the form of key value, always will present at the end of the URL. What about path parameters? Query parameters will represent data in the form of key value, always will present at the end of the URL. How to read the query parameter? How to read query parameter? By using request param annotation. What about path parameter? Directly it will represent the data. It can present anywhere in the URL. Path parameter should represent its position in the URL pattern. How to read that path parameter from the URL? By using which annotation? By using path variable annotation. By using path variable annotation, we can read that path variable. Now, the biggest question, when to take path parameter, when to take query parameter. Right. When we are developing the REST API, when should I go for path parameter? When should I go for query parameter? Any idea? Any clue? That also can be fetched with ID, right? Here also I can pass the ID. Here also I am passing the ID. Here also I am passing the ID. Both are sending in the URL, no security. Both query parameter will go in the URL only. Path parameter also will go in the URL only. No. First of all, we are provider. Client will not tell what to develop. We will develop whatever we want. We will give to the client. There is no client requirement because it is a provider application. We are the owners here. Slash multiple. Suppose if you want to take multiple path parameters, ID, data, then I want to take name. You can take it. Multiple path parameters also you can take. Observe.
So
When client is sending a get request, when client is sending, observe carefully when to use path parameters and when to use query parameters. If a client want to get a record with a unique ID, then you will go for path parameters. Okay, with the given ID, you can identify a unique record. with the given ID, if you can identify a single record, unique record, then that we will take as a path parameter. If a client requests for multiple records as a response, whatever the request client is sending, with the client, whatever the data client is sending to get the result, if your method is giving more than one record as a response, then you will take query parameters. If your method is giving a single unique record as a response, then you will go for path parameter. For unique record, one record, unique identification, that will be done with the path parameter. If you are getting bulk records with the client given value, then you will go for query parameter. That is the standard that people are going to follow. So you can use always query parameters or you can use always path parameters, no problem. But in the industry standard, query parameter means with that multiple records client can get. Okay, if your method is giving multiple records to the client, then you will take it as a query parameter. If you are giving a single unique record to the client, that ID we will take it as a path parameter. Path parameter means unique identified record. Query parameter means bulk records will go as a response. That standard people will follow in the industry. But some people, they will go with only path parameters for multiple records also. Some people will go with query parameter for single record also. According to their convenience, people are using path parameters or query parameters. But industry standard, path parameter means unique record. Query parameter means bulk records will be available. Okay. Now, I want to get my ticket based on the ticket ID. Then ticket ID, unique record will be available with the ticket number. So the ticket number I will take as a query parameter or path parameters. Path parameters. Now, I want to get the books which are written by author, name is equal to some Rod Johnson. The name, that author can have more than one book. That author can write more than one book. So now how to take the author name? Query parameter. Why I am taking author name as a query parameter? Bulk records will be available. One author can publish multiple books. But when it comes to ticket, so based on the ticket number, I want to get the data. So if you are taking a ticket number, go for path parameter. If you are taking author name, then go for query parameter. So unique record, query parameter, multiple records, unique record path parameter, multiple records, query parameters. Good. When you are sending get request to the server, if you want to send some data in the get request, then you will go for request line URL, query parameters and path parameters. What about body for get request? Get request will contain the body or get request will not contain the body? No, get request will not contain the body. What about post request? Post request contains the body or post request does not contain the body? Post request contains the body. Okay. Now today, my post method and get method dealing with only JSON data. They are dealing with only JSON data. Now, some clients want XML as input and output. Some clients want JSON as input and output. How to deal with both formats in the REST API? Currently, my REST API dealing with only JSON as a input, JSON as a output. Now, I want to deal with both the XML JSON as input and output. If you want, you can send the XML. If you want, you can send the JSON. You can take XML as response. You can take JSON as a response. So tomorrow we will understand how to deal with XML data and JSON data in the single REST API. Today it is supporting for only JSON as input, JSON as output. Tomorrow it should support for XML as well as JSON also. Tomorrow we'll work on that. Good. Any questions, anyone? Online people?
Yeah. So that
Online students. Anybody having any questions?
Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah, speak loudly. Sohini, speak loudly.
Yeah. Now is it fine?
No, your voice is very low.
Now is it fine?
It's very low, madam. Speak loudly. जोर से बात करना.
Okay, so the thing is that dispatcher servlet, while doing the post processing of the data, at that time, what is the role of this message converter? Like it is every time giving us JSON data only, right? And we are not providing any content type also, so that it will give any
Message
XML data.
converter role is to convert raw data to Java object to raw data. It depends upon the header that you are sending.
No, that is in pre-processing. What about post-processing? Post-processing,
Here
are we
method is returning object, but client is getting object or client is getting JSON from this
JSON?
method. That means
JSON.
that is post processing, converting object to JSON sent to the client. That will be done by message converter.
Okay.
Yeah,
But
pre-processing will be happening for this method. Post processing is happening for this method. Tomorrow for the one method, XML and JSON both we will see. Tomorrow you will get more clarity on that. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah. Next question. Online people. No questions. Okay. Good.
So with XML, can we convert the data to text also sometime as per the business requirement?
No, objects cannot be converted to text. There is no API which will support object conversion to text.
No, not object conversion. Suppose some comment like that we are going to return.
Yeah, we can do that. That we need to go for custom converters.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Like errors if we are going to return at that time.
Your voice is not audible again.
If errors we need only some errors we want to show, at that case we no need a
We'll see that request validation we have to perform.
Okay. Okay.
Guys, I'm uploading the class notes in the portal. Yeah, offline students, any questions, anyone? Yeah. Then conversion is not required. That JSON directly will be represented as a string only. It is a text, normal text. Whatever the JSON is coming, directly it will be stored into string variable. That's it. No need of any conversion. String means group of characters. All complete JSON will be one string. Na? We can call it as one string. That is completely one string now. Guys, can you check it? Notes is uploaded.
One more question, Ashok sir. Like this dispatcher servlet to message converter to the Jackson API. So this one, can we see somehow in backend code base?
No, we can't see that. That is internal logic.
Yeah, that internal logic we cannot open anywhere.
Yeah, we can't see that logic.
Okay.
It is a predefined class now. We can't see that.
Only documentations will be
Yes,
available.
documentation will tell you that. It is happening like that. Okay, fine guys. Thank you.